It's indeed been a day for resignation. At the moment, 3 Nigerian ministers, Godswill Akpabio, Ogbonnaya Onu, and Emeka Wajuba, have resigned from the federal cabinet. Their resignation followed a directive by President Muhammadu Buhari asking all cabinet members interested in elective position to quit not later than Monday, May 16. Adesua here has the report.
Nothing in the president's body language at the commencement of the Federal Executive Council meeting today gave away what was about to be the last attendance and end of the participation of some members of cabinet in his administration. Vice President Professor Yemi Osinbajo, Secretary to the Government of the Federation Boss Mustapha, and the Ministers of Justice, Water Resources, Sports and Youth Development were some of those who attended physically. It came to light that during the closed-door meeting, the president directed all ministers nursing political ambition in 2023 to resign on or before Monday, May 16th.
All members of the Federal Executive Council aspiring to run for office, either be it president or governor or National Assembly, must resign from cabinet effectively by the 16th, which is Monday of this month.
Asked if the directive will be extended to other federal appointees outside the cabinet, like the central bank governor, Minister Mohammed said he did not have the mandate to talk on the fate of those political appointees.
As of this moment, this is my mandate. Subsequently, it may affect other, categories of political appointees, but that will be made known. But as of today, speak to you, my mandate from the President is that all members of the Federal Executive Council vying for office will have to resign their appointments on or before 16th of May 2022.
At least 5 members of President Buhari's cabinet are seeking to succeed him in 2023. They include the Ministers of Transportation, Rotimi Amechi, Niger Delta Affairs, Godswill Akpabio, Labour and Employment, Chris Ngige, Science, Technology and Innovation, Ogbonnaya Onu, Ministers of State for Education, Emeka Wajuba, and the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Timipre Silva. Others known to have declared intentions in the forthcoming elections are the Minister of Justice and Attorney General of the Federation, Abubakar Malami, who is vying for the Kebbi State governorship seat, Minister of State, Mines and Steel, Uche Oga, who is running for the governorship position in Abia State, and the Minister of Women Affairs, Pauline Talon, who declared her ambition to contest for a senatorial seat in Plateau State. The directive of the president comes after an appeal court sitting in Abuja ruled that Section 84, subsection 12 of the amended Electoral Act passed this year was unconstitutional. The clause prevents political appointees at any level from being a voting delegate or be voted for at the convention or congress of any political party for the purpose of the nomination of candidates for any election. However, the guidelines by the governing All Progressives Congress requires political appointees to resign 30 days before participating as candidates at elective primaries, otherwise face disqualification. With the primaries slated to be concluded by June 3rd, the question now is, will the party disqualify the cabinet members? Adesua Omoran, Arise News.
Meanwhile, the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Boss Mustapha, has released a circular reiterating the directives of the President. For the avoidance of doubt, the directive affects all ministers, heads and members of extra-ministerial departments and agencies and parastatals of government, ambassadors as well as political appointees who desire to contest for elective offices. For smooth running of the machinery of government and our foreign missions, affected ministers are to hand over to the ministers of state where they exist or to the permanent secretary where there is no minister of state. Ambassadors shall hand over to their deputy head of mission or the most senior foreign service officers in line with the established practices. Okay, here we go.
I mean, I don't even know. I recall that nickname that President Buhari had at the inception of his administration when he took about 6 months to get his cabinet together, Baba Go Slow. But we can see he got there in the end. Eventually, he did get there. And I'm so glad, kudos to the president for actually taking leadership and setting order to this complete chaos. I mean, I have to say, with regards to the ministers, I thought it was some fever dream, but I do recall a time in this country where this kind of conduct was impossible. So I had to go and check specifically, and I was not dreaming. President Olusegun Obasanjo's cabinet in November 2002, they had the resignation of 3 ministers and 10 aides to the president who were trying to vie for different elective positions in the next elections, which was in April 2003. By November 2002, they had resigned. So what we're seeing here is a complete aberration. And it is to the president's credit, I have to say, that he's actually made his stance and corrected it finally. But I do have to state that behind every shameful act of impunity that we ever see in this country, there's some kind of ambulance chasing, pettifogger disgrace to their profession, and often their silk, pushing these political appointees, these ministers, these people into all kinds of impunity, encouraging all kinds of nonsense, justifying it for the sake of a check and some column inches. And while we're commending President Buhari for getting his house in order, I think the NBA, the Nigerian Bar Association, should call a lot of lawyers and SANs to order for the role that they play in this kind of shenanigans. Because these ministers, for them to have the confidence to even attempt to sit tight, you have that contentious section 84 subsection 12, which I'm sure you'll get to in due course, but you also have your party's guidelines. To go back to President Obasanjo's era, the PDP guidelines at that time was that they had to resign a month to the election, but they resigned about 6 months to the election just to give some dignity to what we're discussing, the exalted office of president, governor, whatever else. And this is what needs to be, addressed here. They have dragged the entire political process in the mud. And, finally, some sanity, thank goodness.
Dr. Bati?
Well, I can talk on this for the next 1 hour, but I'll try to be very brief. Let me start with the dilemma of the uncertainty, the confusion that was created by these ministers, political appointees, persons working in parastatals and agencies of government who simply refused, that they were not going anywhere. In the last week of April, with regard to the APC, because the PDP, is not the ruling party. The ruling party directed that in line with Section 3I of its electoral guidelines, that anybody that was a political appointee should leave 30 days, resign their appointments. Otherwise, they will not be allowed to vote or participate in the party's process. And the party are taking an enlightened position in line with Section 84.12 of the Electoral Act. The argument that was put up by persons working in the federal cabinet and in the federal government was that that particular section is, in violation of Section 66 of the extant Constitution and also Section 42 of the 1999 Constitution, as was originally argued in the president's response to the National Assembly. Meanwhile, there were cases in court. They also argued. The National Assembly, through Kauri Ajula Eskaya, its counsel, has sought the leave of the court in Umuahia to go further to an appellate court. Now, that was granted, but the matter had not yet been, a date had not yet been fixed. Meanwhile, the People's Democratic Party had gone to the Court of Appeal in Abuja. So they were relying on that to say, the matter was in court. So they disobeyed the party. So beyond the law, I'll come back to the law. There's also the issue of conflict of interest. Many senior advocates of Nigeria, many lawyers said, look, there's a conflict of interest here. Only this week, 32 civil society organizations took to the streets to protest, to say we cannot have this kind of conflict of interest. Beyond the law, there's also something about morality. You can't be minister in the federal cabinet or the head of a parastatal, like the man who is the head of the Mint of Nigeria, struggling to become a governor in a state, the Attorney General of the Federation struggling to be governor in Kebbi State, and then you still say you will stay in government office. How about even the morality of it? So people protested. Everybody carried placards that, look, you may have the right, but at least just leave, because it's Nigerians that will be suffering. Many of these presidential aspirants, they've been going from one village to one hamlet. They will say they are consulting. What time did they have to do the job? And people were appealing to the president to say, look, follow the example of the state governors. In Sokoto State, within 2 days, 13 commissioners resigned because the governor stood up and said, if you want to run for office, can you leave? 13 resigned immediately. In Lagos State, many also left, but it was only at the federal level that we had that issue. So I will not commend President Buhari. He acted rather late. The only caveat you can put there is that we're better late than never. He should have asked these ministers to leave long before now. However, the reports also indicate that the president finally decided to act after Emeka Nwajuba, Minister of State for Education, decided as far back as April 28 to resign. The only one out of the lot who could summon the courage to say, okay, I've applied to be president of Nigeria. No, it's time to go. Let me go and focus on that ambition. And we were told that on Wednesday that the president specifically cited the example of Emeka Nwajuba, who has shown courage and honor and integrity by being the first to submit his letter of resignation. All the other ones in the ministries, parastatals, agencies, they are thinking of how to eat their cake and still hold it in their hands and stay along. In fact, the most surprising that I find here is that one minister has said he will not resign until he consults with President Buhari and his constituents. What kind of talk is that? You hold that position, whether you are head of a parastatal or an agency, at the pleasure of the president. And the president has given a directive. Which other consultation? After you have bought forms, what do you want to consult again?
Has he paid for the form?
Well, for him to have collected the forms, he may have paid. So, What is the scenario now? I think, one, the APC as a party, it has fixed the screening process for March 14 and 15. I think the party is also in a position to say that all those political appointees who defy the directive of the party and are members of the party are anti-party agents, and they could be summarily disqualified. Two, another option is to just resign and move on. Some of them have already complied. We have not had some people. We hear Akpabio has resigned, Amitions has resigned, Ogbonnaya has resigned.
But we also have not had Akpabio has not resigned.
No. His spokesperson, Jackson, Udom has issued a statement to say that is not true, that he has resigned and is not withdrawing from the race. We have not heard from Pauline Tallen. We have not heard from Uche Oga. Okay? All these other people, okay, when are they going to follow the president's directive? To disobey the president is an act of insubordination.
They have till the 16th of May.
Well,
we'll take it all the way to the 16th of May.
Okay, we will wait now. But if they disobey the president will have no option but to ask them to leave.
Yeah. Whether
you are consulting with anybody, no. You hold the position at the pleasure of the president. So you say they have till 16. How many minutes does it take to tender a letter of resignation?
People that have sat tight this long.
Which leads me to the third point. The third point now is that if you don't want to resign, if you are now having doubts, it means that your 100 million, you have forfeited it. Or your 50 million, you have forfeited it. Okay? So that is the third option that is available to them. And those of them who do not want to resign, who do not want to leave, who are saying they will have to consult over the president's directive, then of course they should also have the integrity to come to us and say, I've changed my mind. I don't want to run again. Because I've had one or two ministers say they want to complete their tenure and that they are not running for. What kind of impudence, impertinence is being allowed here? You know, the president is the chief executive. He can sack you at any time. Why is it that ministers are not saying, I'm completing my tenure? Who are you to say that?
But are you still expecting integrity?
This is the kind of thing we see.
Integrity left the room a long time ago.
You know, somebody sent me a message yesterday. It was a screen grab. And my response, obviously, to the message was hate speech. He said, because of the emergence of Zelensky being a comedian on national TV, that every comedian now thinks they can be president of Nigeria. And I responded, I said, hate speech, that's too much. But that's what it has become. Our nation has become a joke. It's a circus, it's a pantomime, it's slapstick comedy. It's like a scene from Charlie Chaplin. But I think the difference is that this is not silent comedy like Charlie Chaplin. Or probably, let me push it one step further. Maybe it's a scene from modern times. At least Charlie Chaplin did speak in modern times. But that's who we have become. We have become a nation where people want to serve the people, but they don't have any moral pedestal to serve the people.
They don't want to serve the people. They want power.
They want power. Because if you truly want to serve the people, at first you will go on the path of morality. So what I see is this. I don't want to act like I'm some Nostradamus now, but a lot of people are going to go to court because you see, most of those ministers have violated that Article 3 in the APC Constitution. And people are not going to sit lying low. And that's why, sensibly, Emeka Owajuba, being the skilled politician he was, deliberately made the calculation right. And that's why that 28th of April just comes in straight a month before that 1 month threshold kicks in. The APC screening committee, even if they let it slip through the cracks, I foresee people getting ready now going to court because of that. So those federal cabinet ministers that they thought that they were trying to be smart, probably they might have been outsmarted. That's number one. Number two, if we truly have a great sense of thinking politicians, the president ought not to be the one to say, go before you go.
Exactly.
So I wonder what kind of political dexterity they have. Because you see, the kind of politician I used to think they were politicians that were very calculative, that would be able to read 3-4 moves down the line. Who were their shamanists? Were they telling them lies that the president were just going to allow it slip through the cracks like that?
It's their lawyers.
Without putting it, so probably the lawyers have become the shamanists and giving them false hope. And why was it the same day that 8212 passed in favor of some people, then the master guillotine fell on all of them? There's a lot of politicking going on. There's no time to speak about it. But meanwhile, the Lower Chamber have amended Section 84.8A of the Electoral Act 2022 to enable statutory delegates to participate in political parties, congresses, or convention. The Senate had on Tuesday amended the section of the Electoral Act. The amendment followed the consideration and passage of a bill for an act to amend the Electoral Act number 13, 2022 on related matters, presented by the House Leader, Honorable Ado Doguwa. Statutory delegates include councillors, chairmen of local government areas, state and federal lawmakers, governors and their deputies, president and vice president, political parties, national working committee members, state party chairmen and secretaries. The bill scaled through first, second and third readings and was passed.
This is a matter that is very critical, that in our journey to nationhood and through our legal democratic processes, we feel it is worthy that this House do convene this afternoon to consider this important amendment. We have discussed enough among ourselves, and I believe each and every one of us is ready for this national assignment. I therefore want to urge honorable members that upon the discussions we have had, upon the commitment we have made to ourselves, that this is a worthy amendment, I urge my respected colleagues to move in the same line, on same direction, to be able to cure this particular injury in the body of our legal framework. I rise to move as directed that this House do consider report of a bill for an act to further amend the Electoral Act number 13/2022 and for related matters, HB 1991. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, I so move.
Those in favor of the motion say aye. Against say nay. The ayes have it. Respected colleagues, I want to thank you very much for your time, dedication. We appreciate you, and may the blessings of Almighty God be upon all of us. Colleagues, we have attended to so many national matters of national importance, but there's something that is still left out, and I want to use and beg our chairman of committees of labor, education, to expedite action on the resolution of the crisis in the education industry. This will go a long way in helping our citizens.
Right. A quick take on this.
Well, there's already some kind of cynical analysis that's emerged that this sudden amendment is to favor the Senate President, Ahmed Lawan, since he has now joined the list of people who have bought presidential nomination form. That's why his people in the National Assembly are supporting him. Now, I don't quite subscribe to that, but I don't blame anybody for their cynicism because, as you have said, we have been reduced to this, farcical spectacle here. I think it's more of an oversight. And, for me, I try and find whatever I can praise. I'm always looking for the silver lining. My mental hygiene depends on it, quite frankly. But I'll share a story now, which might put some things into some context from yesterday. I used to work at the National Assembly, and I remember a senator's office handing in a bill to that exactly as they had received it from a particular embassy to the Rules and Business Committee. But that bill, that embassy didn't do all the work for you. They had gaps. You'd be liable to dash amount of years or dash amount of naira in fines. They left that blank. They handed it in like that with the blank. They didn't even bother trying to research and see what could be a commensurate, penalty for the offense. Nothing. So, I'm used to these things. But apart from that, we also have a situation. No, it's true. Real story. We have a situation where President Buhari finally passed the Petroleum Industry Act in August. In September, he was back to amend it just a month later. So this kind of inelegant, sort of shambolic behavior in the National Assembly, unfortunately, is not unheard of, which is why I don't subscribe to that. I feel that it was an oversight because these things do happen.
I thought somebody boasted that I wrote that bill. Dr. Pati.
No, I think there's no problem here. There was an oversight in the Electoral Act 2022, Section 84(8) thereof. And I made this point yesterday. I didn't know we were going to talk about it again. I thought we were going to talk about, the ruling of the Court of Appeal yesterday with regard to Section 84(12). But this is what we have. And we were told that, look, the House of Reps was also going to return from recess to quickly do the same thing that the Senate did a day earlier to prevent a situation whereby those that are called statutory delegates will be locked out of the, primaries process. And I think I pointed out yesterday that under the previous act, the Electoral Act 2010, in Section 87, there were statutory delegates, governors, presidents, councillors, that was listed, who also attended party primaries and could have a say in it. So what the National Assembly is saying is that this was an oversight and we want to correct it. And we raise the question, would the president sign? And I think the pertinent question is that the president himself is a beneficiary of that amendment. I do not expect that the president will make a big issue out of it. But it is good to have these persons, super delegates, as they are otherwise known, who are members of the party. They are even the leaders of the party. What Section 84(12) has tried to correct is to prevent a situation whereby these super delegates will have an unfair advantage over other people by bringing 200 special assistants, 100 personal assistants. Some of them even have houseboys. They give them one fancy titles, as delegates. And they will come and use the fact that they are inside the corridors of power to influence a process that should be democratic, that should reflect internal democracy. We just hope that the president would, give his assent expeditiously, and that in terms of the timetable, there will be no problems. But it will be nice to have these persons, at the conventions of the parties and not sit at home and be watching it on television. The only thing we can complain about is the inelegance of it. How is it that nobody thought of it, including Ovio Agege, who was a co-sponsor of the original amendment. But again, he has tried to redeem himself. He's a sponsor of it also this time around.
So for me, I'll slightly take a different view because, you see, my mental hygiene has been so bastardized in this country that I don't see the forest for the trees any longer.
Don't let them get you, Rufai.
I'm serious.
Don't let them get you.
I think there's something behind it. And I subscribe to those views. You enunciated, Tundu. Why now? I keep asking. So I think there's something behind it. I think when people talk and the sources come out, there's always something. Because this country, yes, I know we want to be very linear sometimes and say, okay, things should work clockwork. But Nigeria is not clockwork. Nigeria is like a scene from Lafayette. It's magic. So it's not clockwork. So there's something in the offing somewhere. And, with time it will come out and it will come clear. And I think what they're fighting for grossly is 7,800 delegates. Let's see how they are able to jostle things and pull things out. But definitely this super delegate confirmation, if they finally confirm and pass and the president signs it, it's going to tilt one balance or the other. It's not just hard and fast like that. So I think there's a game somewhere. Me just thinking out loud. That's all on News Headline. We take a short break. When we return, we'll have Rotus, we'll have Michael, we have Aaron to give updates on Africa global business fund activities across the globe. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Our dependable Rotus Adiri is here to give us an African business update. Good morning, Rotus.
Good morning, Tundu. Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning to all our viewers. We begin with education in Nigeria. The United Nations, this is UNICEF's Children's Fund in Kano. The United Nations Children's Fund in Kano, their Chief of Field Officer, Ramawar Farai, expressed, pretty much lamenting the number of out-of-school children there are in Nigeria, 18.5 million. Key metric out of this, though, is that 10 million of them, about 60%, were girls. And Farah was speaking during the media dialogue on girls' education, under the Girls' Education Project for UNICEF. And, insecurity came up again. Yesterday we were talking about the reports, the report that came out from Augusto and Co., where they're talking about how insecurity continues to impact Nigeria. UNICEF talked about the number of attacks on schools around the country and how that is impacting education. If you want a productive economy, if you want proper GDP growth, if you want innovation, you need an educated populace. So if your youth are not able to get into schools and don't have access to the materials that they need, you're in trouble. Just one problem is just them being out of school. Even the ones that are in the schools, there's also the issues with whether curriculums are up to date. Kenya, which was a few months ago, passed a rule to where curriculums in primary and secondary schools now have to include coding, right? There was something they did with Microsoft and another company where they're going to be putting in coding into their curriculum. So you need a populace that is properly educated, that actually is sticking with the times as far as where things are going. What's 18 million? That's Ghana's population is what, 2025? The population of out-of-school children in Nigeria is, you can combine any number of African countries. It's a nation on its own based on that number. And population growth continues to climb. So, you have to, all this coming out during a very heightened election period. This is another question that you throw to an aspirant that comes on our flagship morning show. What do you plan to do to reduce the amount of out-of-school children in schools? What do you plan to do to improve curriculums? What do you plan to do to improve the future of this nation based on our youth who everything is riding on as far as advancement for them. On the Global Business Reports, last week or so, this week, we had a Nigerian who moved to Australia back in the 90s, and now she started a business where she's helping students to move to Australia and go to school there and even get jobs there. So I think she's in Queensland. So it's a big issue. It's something that needs to be on the front burner as far as the country is concerned. Another front burner issue is inflation. Goodness gracious, we go to Ghana. Ghana's inflation is now at 23.6% for April. This is an 18-year high. Yesterday, I was talking about Kenya at 6.1%, how that was a 4-year high. Food inflation is at 26% in Ghana. For the first time in, I think, about 18 or is it 20 months, imported items surpassed locally produced as far as impact on the inflation basket. And we're now starting to see, I think, the Ukraine invasion by Russia, the impact now is really seeping in. Let's talk about crude palm oil. This is mind-blowing. Do you know that Indonesia is responsible for almost 50% of the world's crude palm oil? One country is responsible for crude palm oil supply from around the world. And the fact that they've actually curbed exports, this actually fed into price increases in Ghana. So there was a direct impact. And you need to think about this. The maturity, the gestation period for crude palm oil is 13 years. If I give birth to a child today and I plant a kernel of crude palm oil today, my child will be 13 years old, entering junior secondary school by the time that kernel of crude palm oil matures. You need to think about the foresight, the dedication, the discipline of the Indonesian government from the 50s and 60s when they came to Nigeria to take crude palm oil kernels, and for them to systematically make sure that it has grown over that period of time to where they are now responsible for 50% of the world's supply. And so this directly impacted the rise, since Ghana is importing so much from overseas and they also need crude palm oil. It directly impacted Ghana. Here's a quote, though, from an analyst I've been talking. I've had him on the Global Business Report, Kweku Adobili, talking to him. This is actually, I got his permission to quote this on a WhatsApp conversation. He says, on the ground, inflation, this is in Ghana, is way worse than 30%. In real terms, the average Ghanaian spends about 50% of their disposable income on food. Almost all fresh food items are up more than 100%. How do you square that circle? So now, I mean, it's not just in Ghana, it's here too. We also question whether or not, look, see, if that is if Ghana's inflation was 19.2% in March, going to 23.6, that's like a 40 basis point climb. If you apply that 40 basis point climb to Nigeria's inflation of 15.92, you are now approaching almost 20% inflation. And then people will still actually question whether or not, in fact, I was having a discussion with one of our members of our sound engineering team where he was saying, Rotus, are inflation numbers here in Nigeria even believable? Because cost of this item, that item are up over more than 100%. We go to the Bank of Ghana. This now places them under severe pressure. Bank of Ghana, the Ghanaian Central Bank Governor, Dr. Ernest Addison. This man now has a needle to thread. The MPC is meeting, I believe, on May the 23rd. Just in March, they hiked their benchmark rate to 17%. I think it's a 3-year high because of inflation. And that was when, and they're not even, the Bank of Ghana's inflation band is from 6 to 10%, and your inflation is at 23. So, the question now is, do they continue to chase inflation and continue to raise interest rates when output is low? Yeah, we had the opposition leader who we talked about him last week saying that Ghana is facing a debt crisis and could default. If you now hike interest rates again, it's like a boa constrictor, squeezing its prey. You're going to you could push the economy into recession. So this Russia-Ukraine war, it is really impacting emerging markets across the world. And look, the UK GDP, and Michael Wilson will take you through that. UK GDP contracted in March. US GDP contracted in the first quarter. They are talking of recession fears in the US, recession fears in the UK. Possibly Ghana's next, by the time we have to now look for Q2 GDP for Ghana, Nigeria, and these other countries. All these other countries, because of the cost of goods and cost of living increase, they could also fall into recession as well.
Once again, I have to thank Vladimir Putin for this gift that keeps giving. But with regards to Ghana's central bank, really, what other options do they have? Because you recall the IMF did give that advice. Everybody hike your interest rates to target inflation and what have you. That's what they did. And, you know, to no avail.
They might want to just leave rates flat because if they hike again, the pass-through effects of what's going on with the war, it's now really generating impact. So the inflation may not have peaked in Ghana. So if they hike again next week and inflation goes to what, 25, 26%, do you just keep hiking till you get to 30% benchmark rate? It's tough. Tight.
But these are exciting times.
Exciting.
Silver lining. Yeah, I'll tell you why.
If you're in Lagos business school students, yes, for case studies, exciting. But for people on the ground, it's tough.
So let me land.
Okay, go ahead.
I'll tell you why. Historically, anytime you've always had a pandemic and afterwards a war, it follows years of boom. It brings about ingenuity. And I think that's what's lacking.
In the long term?
Yeah, in the long term. And I mean, obviously, when you check economic history, after 1918 war, 1919, then what happened to the stock market from the 1925?
Which stock market? In Western?
No, the American stock market.
Okay.
It rallied. It went up.
Africa.
No,
What,
not Africa.
Roaring 20s?
So the roaring 20s, and there was a state of boom because the depressive form of the economy brings about a level of ingenuity. And I think that's what's lacking in Ghana. This is the time of Ken Ofori-Atta should spur the Ghanaian economy. This is the time there should be a lot of injection for entrepreneurship. What Ghana is paying for are the things they failed to do so many years back. They can actually churn out those products in palm oil. They can actually churn out those products. In fact, when they started the one district, one factory model, it was working for them. But all of this has become, as a result of COVID happened, then the Ukrainian crisis is happening. And the government of Akufo-Addo was not very sensible in cutting its coat according to its size. There was still big budgets, there was still corruption along the line. People were still spending stupidly and the likes. And now it's taking a big toll. And you see why inflation is growing is because the measures they are putting to tax more, to collect more revenue from the people are reacting, and it's in turn leading to inflationary pressures.
But the government needs money.
The government needs money.
They don't have money.
So the government needs to look other ways for money. It has looked at the e-levy. But the thing about the e-levy is, yes, you wanted to tax the informal sector because they are not captured, but it's putting the squeeze on the people. There are some data that are coming out on Ghana that are saying even digital transactions started to reduce because of the tax and e-levy.
By the way, that tax, they reduced the number.
And they reduced the number. So what is happening is the government needs to look out of the fund. I think down the line, Ghana will need to talk to IMF. At some point. They will need to talk to IMF. They will need to look for a way to be able to cushion the effect. But long term, the government now needs to come in and invest in people. You are talking about Indonesia. It's not only palm oil that is giving Indonesia money. Indonesia has got big electronic sector. They do like 7.8 billion or thereabout in US dollar in terms of electronic exports and the like. They've got other sectors. So agriculture is complementary. Africa needs to think beyond just agriculture. It can be a base point to be able to mop up a lot of employment, but you need other sectors where you have high value adding goods. Africa needs to now start thinking about that.
Like your PS5.
Now your PS5s and the like, and industrialization. So they need to think about that. And that's why I say, for the sake of silver lining, after every big burst, then there's a roaring opportunity. But that's if we take it.
That's true.
Okay, Ghana. Inflation, 23.6%. Yesterday, you brought the case of Kenya. Kenya, 6.1% or so. But the truth of the matter is that this inflationary trend is global. Every country quotes the war in Ukraine, the disruptions as regards COVID and the COVID zero policy strategy in China, and also the disruptions in the global and demand supply, such that the cost of living crisis in the UK has gone through the roof, right? Such that America is even looking at the possibility of a recession. 9 other major countries are looking at that. Now, the question is, what can countries do? Should they wring their hands in utter helplessness? In the case of Ghana, Ghana in January decided to reduce, to raise interest rates, right? But there's a limit to which they can do that. The Minister of Finance last year for the budget 2022 proposed the E-level The e-levy was supposed to address budget deficit. Now, that led to protests. It hasn't quite worked. Now, the third issue was that this Monetary Policy Committee, at their last meeting, they recommended reduction in government spending. In fact, the Ghanaian government went a step further and announced a reduction of 20 to 30% in salaries of public officials. But the question is, why is it not all working? Because it is difficult, it is, just expected that everybody will blame what is happening all over the world. Even Boris Johnson, after the Queen's speech, was saying there's nothing we can do about it. This is just the way it is. Right. We just have to hope for the best, and I will continue to serve you better. But emerging markets, developing economies are worst hit. What are the fears? The fears would have to do with one, how all of this can result in political instability, as has been predicted by the Bretton Woods institutions. And we've seen the extent of that in Sri Lanka, where there's utter chaos and confusion, if we can say that. If African countries get to that level, it will be really sad indeed. And 2024 elections in Ghana, already the leader of the major opposition party, the NDC, President Mahama, is already criticizing the government and trying to drive up sentiments. But it's fine for us to talk about Ghana, 23.6% inflation. It was the Ghanaian statistician general that disclosed it. Samuel Anim is his name. Do we know the actual measurement of the inflation rate in Nigeria? Because from the evidence of our eyes here in Nigeria, inflation may even be more than 50%.
That's what
they may give us a different figure, but in our pockets, we know the effect. Now, secondly, you were talking about Indonesia. Now, those Southeast Asian countries, they don't like to hear when you say, they took palm oil seedlings from Nigeria. I think some Malaysians already said that's not true. That is from a Dutch origin. Even the Indonesians, they don't agree to that. But the major issue with Indonesia, on April 18, Indonesia faced with a situation whereby global prices for, the palm oil has gone up, right? That was also affecting domestic consumption.
Yes.
And so the major challenge for their government is to see how to strike a balance between what they push out there for the benefit of other people and how they help their own people back home. And they control, in fact, up to 60%, about a third of palm oil production in the world. And part of the reason is that Ukraine, which is the major source of sunflower oil, is in turmoil. That supply has been cut off. But to come back to Nigeria, what happened to palm oil production in Nigeria? When I was an undergraduate on my way to Calabar, anytime, we had all these palm tree plantations all over. What happened? Because today, with this crisis in Ukraine, you've been talking about gas, how we could leverage on gas supply, like Angola, like some other countries in Africa, like Libya and others. Palm oil will have been a good opportunity. Right. If we did not cut down all the trees, if we did not mismanage all the plantations. So this is the price you pay, to go back to your original point about what the Indonesians did, about vision, about leadership. I hope we will learn the right lessons.
Well, Nigeria caught the Dutch disease. That's what happened.
Exactly. Yeah.
On that cherry note, thank you, Rotus. Moving on to more business update, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Morning. I don't really have any cheery notes to offer you, basically. We saw those very hot inflation figures in the United States yesterday. Unsurprisingly, that's caused the Asia-Pacific markets to wonder what on earth is going on. China doing reasonably well, but we know about that because we know from yesterday that the government is very much behind the stock market there. But its fourth largest property developer, this one's Sunak, failed to make a payment yesterday, and although that really illustrates the problems going through the property sector, we've touched on it over the past couple of days, but it has been masked by COVID. It looks like the cases in COVID are actually falling very, 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 very slightly in China. We may have better information as the day goes on. As a result of this, China may rack up more debt as lockdowns hit the economy. Now, yesterday, China, or day before yesterday, China was saying that it's going to boost the infrastructure spending. That came out of the Politburo meeting on April the 29th as well, which is supposed to have sent a very strong signal about them targeting an increase in GDP, and it's therefore on track to issue more debt. Shanghai, car makers there have seen production plunge by 75%, where it's home to companies like Ford, Tesla, Volkswagen, General Motors. The auto industry is about 1/6 of jobs and 10% of the sales of retail sales. So that's quite big. As far as let's talk globally, and the number of big companies which apparently are reaching out to targets and saying they're going to achieve by a certain time has got to what's called what people are referring to as critical mass. In other words, that the general consensus is that this is what companies are actually going to do. Of course, some people doubt whether big oil can actually do it in time. They're relying on unproven technologies, according to their critics. As far as the United States is concerned, then, so stock futures, as you'd expect, down very, very slightly following those very hot inflation figures yesterday. I did say that people will be looking at those to try to work out, to try to figure out whether or not this represents peak inflation in the United States. Who knows? I don't know. Market experts don't seem to know either. But it showed consumer prices jumping to 8.3%, which is very hot indeed. Now, whether that suggests it is at a peak or not, well, they're still trying to work that out. Apple is no longer the world's largest company, taken over, rather unsurprisingly, by Saudi Arabia's Aramco. Aramco just sits there and the oil revenues come in. Apple has to develop things and so on. Which company would you rather run? Which company would rather employ you? That's the question, really, isn't it? I suppose Apple shares down 5% yesterday, down about 20% on the year. Turkey, now they have a very curious way, don't they, of dealing with inflation. Now, you've been talking about inflation. What they do is they lower interest rates. Well, it turns out that the authorities there have been leaning on banks. This is down to tiny transactions in bank terms of between $1 million and $2 million. But they're actually trying to work out whether or not, but they want to know to whom they're selling, just in case they have to prop up the lira again. Fallen 45% against the dollar over the last 12 months. Now, here's a good one. The former president of the ECB, he's now Prime Minister in Italy, Mario Draghi, has come up with something which I suspect this may get some kind of traction. He's been talking to President Biden in the United States. Biden was saying a couple of days ago that rising prices are his biggest domestic problem that he wants to get on top of. And Draghi is suggesting that instead of having a producer's cartel, we have a consumer's oil cartel, which of course turns the whole thing on its back. Now, your country won't like that a great deal as it is a producer. And again, in the United States, our thoughts are a bit sort of worried about that kind of thing. But it might be a useful way forward. Anyway, they're thinking about that and they're talking more about it today. The EU threatens a trade war if the United Kingdom dishes its Northern Ireland Protocol. We know that we know that that protocol is something which is very, very complicated indeed. And again, the US is planning to appoint a very special envoy to try to make sure that it doesn't upset the Good Friday Agreement. That was 24 years ago. Americans pretend that they have this affinity with Ireland since so many are from it, but we'll see whether that actually works or not. Now, you were talking about GDP, and the UK energy bills are set to rise in October. Our own GDP fell for the first month. It was absolutely level, doing absolutely nothing. Families could be paying as much as £2,000, £600 a year more in October, which should take average bills to close to £3,000, which is actually quite a lot. But those figures, we're waiting on to see whether there in fact will be a recession in this country. You were talking about that before. Another month like this, and that's technically where we would actually stand. As far as the oil market's concerned, relatively bullish, it seems. The dollar's slightly weaker, even though those inflation figures are rather hot. They feel as though they're not giving the sort of ammunition to to the Fed to increase rates rapidly. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I'm telling you that WTI has formed the same pattern round about 98.50 a barrel, and Brent, a nice trend line support at $101.5. And finally, Bitcoin, because people are getting out of risky assets, has fallen below 29,000 as that kind of sell-off continues. That's the global view.
Michael, what is causing the cool-off in America? Because we talked about hitting peak inflation, but the numbers came out, and surprisingly, there's sort of like a cool-off and ease-off as regards inflation. So could it be many factors? Could it be the fact that they've got strong job numbers coming out? Could it be that, the economy is slightly starting to rebound, they're mopping up things, and they've done a lot with gasoline prices? That's one. Number two, I'd like to explore this Mario Draghi's idea of a consumer cartel, because Mario Draghi knows what he's saying. He's a professor of economics. He's been a professor for close to 40 years. I respect him a lot. And when he says this, he might just have a solution to the problem, to bust the bubble of OPEC.
Yeah, I have to say, when I read that, I was thinking, it's not a bad idea, is it? It's actually the people using the oil, they therefore regulate their demand for it, and therefore they presumably set the price. That's what tends to happen in other industries, doesn't it? And it hasn't happened yet. I suspect that because there hasn't been this great alarm over oil prices until, this year, people have not been looking at it very, very seriously. But you're absolutely right. Mario Draghi was president of the ECB, absolutely right. Knows what he's talking about. He's been talking to Joe Biden about it. If the EU and the United States decided to join forces, that would be something. There would be dire warnings, I'm sure, from all the oil states. And as we said, as we looked at some of this yesterday, didn't they, saying that any kind of measures to clamp down on oil production would force prices up by about 300%. Well, of course they would say that, wouldn't they? I think this idea is not a bad one, and it may get some traction. It will be very interesting to see. As far as the United States is concerned, I'm as mystified as you are by this. If you've got a strong jobs market, that tends to make it fairly tight, which tends to push up wages, which tends to push up inflation. So the question is, I don't know the answer. What I'm feeling is, remember, these are figures. These don't actually, they're comparative figures and comparative percentages which refer to a year ago. And so they don't necessarily reflect what's really going on. That's the only thing that I can put this down to. They're hot, but not too hot. But, is this peak? Let's hope so, but who knows?
Well, let's go back to that U.S. Labor Department report. That price rises eased in April, 8.6 in March, now down to about 8.3% in March. But it's not system-wide. And the question to ask is, this is still far off from the Federal Reserve's target of 2% inflation. So the question to ask is, how far can this go? And is it really a true reflection of the reality? And can it serve as a basis for optimism?
To that question, then
Excuse me?
The job is yours, basically. If you fancy the job, then it's yours, Doctor. It really is, because I don't think anybody has any idea at all about where all this is going. Certainly from the Fed's point of view, certainly from the Bank of England's point of view, and we've got now, haven't we, the ECB possibly throwing out possible hints about a possible interest rate rise in July. Does anybody know what's going on? I don't think they do. I think they're really, really worried about pushing just that little bit too far, and that's why there's this waiting game going on to find out how real this level of inflation actually is. That's as simple as I can put it. And I, like you, am mystified by this. I'm mystified by what the jobs figures are in the United States and why they are not themselves leading to higher inflation, which you would normally expect if more people are in work. That's the way it is. That's the way it's been.
I was going to ask you about windfall tax. Treasury officials appear to be talking from both sides of the mouth. They are now quoting Chancellor Sunak as having said something in an interview.
Yes, he's actually said. We've rehearsed the arguments about a windfall tax. It sounds like a good idea, and what the theory is, of course, it might stop companies companies investing as a result of the windfall tax. What Sunak is saying is, if you, big oil, you Shell and you BP, want to avoid a windfall tax, then you need to be investing a huge amount into the UK economy. Shell, for its part, said the day before yesterday, it's been investing it will, over the next decade, invest between 20 and 25 billion pounds into the economy. So it's really, I think the oil companies know what lies in wait for them. The thing that I would point out about a windfall tax is if it reduces the profits of the companies, then it reduces the dividends that those companies pay on their shares, and they have been quite faithful in doing that, which then has a knock-on effect to everybody's whose pensions are invested, and indeed some of their state pensions which are invested in this country, which are supported by oil shares. So it's not quite as easy as that, but certainly Sunak's now, what he's actually saying is, look, we haven't got rid of the windfall tax idea, but I'm saying to the oil companies, if you want to avoid it, let's see your investment plans.
Right. I believe yesterday you wanted to say something about Jacob Rees-Mogg when I mentioned him, the Minister for Brexit Opportunities. And I was wondering if you'd comment on his comments, rather obvious comments, that playing economic tit for tat with the EU right now will be bad for British consumers with the cost of living crisis. I mean, no kidding. But what are your thoughts on that, attempt to rip up parts of the Northern Ireland Protocol? Because apart from the EU, you also have President Biden, who is really invested because I guess his Irish roots. What's your take on all of that?
Okay, my take on people's Irish roots are fairly cynical, to be honest. I mean, everybody claims, lots of people on the east coast of America claim that. If you go into bars, you still see the tricolour flying and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, that's fine. As far as the Northern Ireland Protocol is concerned, what a mistake that was. This was a little thing that was rushed over, and people didn't think it would matter, and now it's being blown up into something which is probably much bigger than the sum of its parts. I think that Jacob Rees-Mogg is absolutely right. Playing tit for tat with the EU has only got one loser, and that's the smaller of the two tit for tats. So that's us. Unfortunately, that's where we're going to go. And we're looking at, I was talking to a major retailer yesterday, and trying to work out what the advantages of Brexit, especially, have the trade deals got any better? No, they haven't. Why not? Well, because they take a long time. And although you'll see figures bandied about, the fact of the matter is that business is actually thinking to themselves, well, why did we bother? But that was a political decision made a long time ago by people who didn't feel they got any input into the main economic and the main political part of this country, and that was the decision that they took, and that's what we have to live with. That's democracy.
Amazing stuff. Even Obama's got Irish root. Everybody's got them. All right, where is your Irish root, Sundu?
I have no Irish
You've got no Irish root? You've got some Irish root in you? It's fine. It's all right.
No, mine are all Danish, all to do with the Vikings.
Oh, yeah, the Vikings.